It starts in your own home. Your partner looks at you holding your crying child and says, "Move out of the way, they need their mum." She takes them from your arms as if your comfort is counterfeit, as if your love does not count. You're standing there as a father doing what fathers are meant to do, and you're treated like you don't belong. These moments don't happen once, they build, stacking on top of each other until the message is unmistakable. You are not recognized as a full parent. Every instinct you follow is met with a correction. Even if you soothe, it's not the right way. If you make a decision, it's undone with a wave of her authority. Even when you're the one who knows your child's routine, the foods they like, the things that settle them, your knowledge is dismissed like background noise. Maternal superiority as a weapon doesn't shout, it chips away quietly. It recasts your fatherhood as helping, as temporary, as something that exists only when she allows it. You're told your role is to provide, to stand back, to leave the real parenting to her. Over time, you find yourself second guessing whether you're allowed to step in, whether your comfort will be accepted, whether your decisions will hold. The erasure becomes so normal you start to disappear from your children's lives while standing right beside them. This is how maternal superiority becomes a weapon. The abuser positions herself as the sole authority, the one true parent, the only source of real care. Every moment you step in is met with correction. Every decision you try to share is dismissed. Every bond you form is treated as secondary, conditional, easily replaced. What makes it sting even more is that the world outside your home quietly agrees. Society already treats fathers as less. Strangers call you a babysitter for caring for your own children. Professionals turn to her as the default parent, even when you know the details, even when you've done the work. Culture whispers that dads don't really know their kids, that fathers are clumsy, that men who want closeness must be suspect. And in an abusive relationship, she leans on those narratives to tighten her control. When you push back, she calls you overbearing. When you insist on being involved, she frames it as interference. When you claim your right to be a parent, she holds up the cultural script that says you're not supposed to matter. The pain of this is not abstract. It's the grief of being erased in real time, of having your love diminished, of being treated as a visitor in your children's lives. That's what makes maternal superiority framing so devastating. It doesn't just erase you in private, it does so with a chorus of voices ready to say, "She's right." That's the focus of today's episode: maternal superiority as a weapon of control. We're going to look closely at what this tactic really is, how it shows up within abusive relationships, and why it cuts so deeply into a father's sense of identity. Because at its core, this isn't just about authority, it's about love. The love you feel for your children, the instinct to hold them close, to comfort them when they cry, to be present in their lives, and it's treated as less. It's minimized, it's dismissed as though a father's arms are somehow less safe, less nurturing, less valid. When your love is framed as secondary, when your bond is constantly undermined, the pain isn't just frustration, it's heartbreak. It's the ache of being told, directly or indirectly, that the best of what you bring as a parent doesn't really matter. First, we'll define maternal superiority framing and why an abuser uses it. Then we'll break it down into the key ways it's deployed, moments where your parenting is dismissed, overridden, or erased. We'll explore the particular impact this has on men, especially in a culture that already sidelines fatherhood. And we'll talk through practical ways to protect yourself and reclaim your role as a parent. For those of you who are new here, this is Stand Again, a lived experience platform for male survivors of family violence. Abuse is not limited to one gender, But here we focus on the male perspective because it is so often dismissed or misunderstood. If this content helps you, please like, subscribe, and type the words stand again into the chat. Those two words might just help another man find his. Maternal superiority framing is a coercive tactic where the abuser takes the cultural script that mothers are the true parents and uses it to strip away a father's legitimacy in his own children's lives. This isn't about differences in approach or preference. It's about systematically erasing your role and painting fatherhood as unnecessary, lesser, or even dangerous. The abuser doesn't just take center stage. She makes sure there is no room for you. She positions herself as the only one who really knows what the children need, and anything you offer is treated as secondary or suspect. When you comfort your child, you are told to move aside because they need their mum. When you set boundaries or create routines, you are dismissed as too harsh or too soft. When you make a decision about their care, you're accused of not understanding them properly because a mother always knows best. This control often runs deeper than dismissal. It extends into outright accusations about your intent as a father. Wanting to spend time alone with your children can be painted as selfish, inappropriate, or even predatory. Comments arrive with a cutting smile. It's a bit weird how much you want to be with them. What should be natural, a father delighting in his children, caring for them, bonding with them, is twisted by the abuser into something sinister. That cuts deep. The policing goes further when you play with your children. Every laugh, every tickle, every silly game is monitored by the abuser. You're told you're doing it wrong, that you're engaging in bad behavior, that you don't know how to play properly. The message is clear: you're not safe to be alone with your own kids. Your love is reframed as incompetence, your joy as recklessness, your presence as something that must be supervised by the abuser. This weaponization lands hardest when you have daughters. The abuser leans on a cultural undercurrent that already views fathers as less safe than mothers, less trustworthy, less competent, and at times even dangerous. A dad who cuddles his daughter to sleep is called indulgent, inappropriate, or too much. A dad who wants to be the one she runs to when she cries is labeled as overstepping. These accusations are devastating because they don't just undermine your parenting, they attack the very purity of your love. Every dismissal, every accusation leaves a mark. It tells you that your care is irrelevant, that your instincts are wrong, that your love is unsafe. You start to question yourself. You hesitate before picking your own child up. You second guess whether you suggest an outing or whether reading bedtime stories will be used against you. You begin to withdraw, not because your love was dimmed, but because your very fatherhood has been recast as a threat. And even when you do get it right, the recognition is poisoned. You're told you only managed it because she instructed you, or that it's unusual for a dad to handle it so well. Instead of being affirmed as a capable parent, you're patted on the head like a helper who just got lucky. You are never treated as the norm, always as the exception, a visitor in your own children's lives. The cruelty of this tactic lies in how ordinary moments are twisted into evidence. A hug becomes suspicious. A laugh is interpreted as indulgence. A desire to be present is treated as possessiveness. By taking what is sacred, the bond between a father and his children, and draping it in suspicion, the abuser ensures you are never able to simply be dad. And all of this happens against a cultural backdrop that makes the abuse harder to name. Society already reinforces the idea that fathers are helpers at best, intruders at worst. Jokes about daddy daycare and stereotypes about incompetence or unsafe dads create fertile ground for this tactic. The abuser doesn't have to convince anyone from scratch. She simply exploits what culture already whispers, that dads are expendable, questionable, and replaceable. So, how does maternal superiority framing actually show up in day to day life? Let's look at the key ways this tactic is used by an abuser, the patterns and behaviors that strip away your role as a father, and the impact they leave behind. The first type of maternal superiority framing is the they need their mum override. This shows up when you're actively caring for your child and are told that your presence is inadequate, that what the child really needs is their mother. This is one of the most visible and humiliating forms of the tactic. You're physically there, you're emotionally available, you're doing the work of parenting, and still it's dismissed as insufficient. You're ordered to hand over the crying child that is already in your arms. You're interrupted mid comfort, mid connection, mid care. The assertion is clear. Your presence is either unhelpful or actively harmful. The abuser uses this override because it strikes at the heart of paternal identity while appearing completely reasonable. She positions herself as advocating for the child's needs. Who could argue with that? The cultural narrative she's tapping into runs generations deep. Mothers are more naturally attuned. Children settle better with mum. Fathers are well meaning, but ultimately secondary. What makes this particularly cruel is how it exploits doubt that many fathers already carry. We live in a culture that celebrates fathers for babysitting their own children, that jokes about dads being helpless with basic childcare, that frames maternal instinct as biological fact rather than a learned skill. When an abusive partner weaponizes these narratives, she's not just attacking your competence in the moment, she's validating every cultural message that tells you you're just the backup parent. The progression is devastating to watch. Initially, you might resist. You know you can soothe your child. You've done it countless times. But the override happens again and again. Each time you hesitate a little bit longer, each time you question yourself a little more. Maybe she's right. Maybe children do settle better with their mum. Maybe I am making it worse. The impact on your relationship with your children is profound. They begin to learn that when they are upset, daddy gets replaced with mummy. They start looking past you to her for comfort, not because they love you less, but because they've been trained to see her as the solution and you as the problem that needs solving. This creates a devastating feedback loop. The less your children turn to you for comfort, the more evidence the abuser has that they don't really need you. The more you step back to avoid conflict, the more natural her dominance appears. Your withdrawal becomes proof of your inadequacy rather than evidence of systemic exclusion. The override also teaches your children troubling lessons about gender and authority. They learn that fathers are provisional parents, that mothers hold ultimate authority, that emotional needs are gendered. These patterns often follow children into their own adult relationships, perpetuating cycles they never consciously chose. For the abuser, this tactic serves multiple purposes. It maintains her position as the indispensable parent. It creates emotional distance between you and your children that she can later exploit. It establishes a precedent of your inadequacy that becomes useful in other contexts. And it does all of this while appearing to prioritize the children's well being. The second type is dismissal of competence. This emerges when your efforts as a father aren't just recognized, they're ridiculed, rejected, or actively undermined. Your contributions are dismissed before they're even considered, not because they're wrong, but because they came from you. This isn't about disagreeing with your parenting approach. This is about disqualifying your voice entirely. You might research schools extensively, create detailed comparisons, identify the best options for your child's specific needs. The response isn't engagement with your research, it's dismissal of your capacity to research at all. You don't know what you're talking about. You wouldn't understand. Just leave it to me. The abuser uses this dismissal because it's remarkably efficient. Why engage with your ideas when she can simply declare them invalid? Why have conversations when she can end them before they even start? The cultural backdrop makes this strategy even more effective. Society already questions fathers' intuitive understanding of their children's needs. She simply amplifies that questioning until it becomes absolute disqualification. What makes this type particularly disorientating is the inconsistency that often accompanies it. You might be dismissed harshly in private, only to be praised in front of others for being such an involved father. This selective acknowledgement is strategic. It keeps you engaged while maintaining her ultimate authority. It provides just enough validation to prevent you from completely withdrawing while ensuring you never fully, truly valued. The progression of this dismissal is insidious. Initially, you might continue bringing ideas forward, believing that eventually your competence will be recognized. But each dismissal chips away at your confidence. Each rejection reinforces the message that your parenting instincts are fundamentally flawed. Eventually, you stop trying, not because you've stopped caring, but because you've learned that caring openly leads to humiliation. The impact on the children is significant because it's often invisible. They witness their father's ideas being consistently devalued. They learn that dad's thoughts about their well being don't matter as much as mum's. They internalize hierarchies of parental authority that shape their understanding of family dynamics and gender roles. This dismissal also affects the quality of parenting decisions being made. When one parent's input is systematically excluded, the family loses access to different perspectives, different approaches, different solutions. The children suffer the consequences of reduced parental collaboration, even if they never understand why decisions feel limited or one sided. For the abuser, dismissing your competence serves crucial control functions. It prevents you from gaining confidence in your parenting role. It ensures that major decisions remain in her hands. It creates a documented pattern of your apparent disengagement that can be used against you later. And it does this while appearing to protect the children from your supposedly inadequate judgment. The third type is gatekeeping as permission. This doesn't block your parenting outright. Instead, it reframes your involvement as something she has granted. You parent because she allows it. Your time with your children exists at her discretion. Your authority is conditional on her approval. This form of gatekeeping is particularly insidious because it creates the illusion of cooperation while maintaining absolute control. You're allowed to take the children for the day, but only if you follow her routine. You're praised for being helpful, but the praise itself reinforces that you're helping her parent rather than parenting with her. You're given responsibilities when convenient, acknowledged when it suits her agenda, granted access when it aligns with her needs. The abuser uses permission based gatekeeping because it appears generous while maintaining dominance. She seems like the accommodating partner who graciously includes the father. She can point to all the ways that she lets you be involved. The cultural context makes this strategy nearly invisible. Society already frames fathers as secondary parents who need to step up and help out. She simply formalizes this hierarchy until it becomes explicit permission granting. What makes this type so confusing is how it mimics healthy encouragement. When she says, "You're such a great dad when you try," it sounds kind of supportive. When she says, "I'm glad you want to help," it appears appreciative. But underneath these statements lies a consistent message. Your parenting exists at her discretion. Your involvement is conditional. Your authority is borrowed rather than an inherent part of being a parent. The progression of permission based gatekeeping is gradual but relentless. Initially, you might not even notice that your involvement is being framed as optional rather than essential. But the pattern establishes itself. You begin to seek permission for things that should be natural parenting decisions. You ask rather than inform. You request rather than plan. You operate within boundaries she's established rather than ones you've negotiated together. The impact on your relationship with your children is very profound. They learn that time with daddy is something that gets granted or withdrawn based on mum's decision. They witness you asking permission for basic parenting activities. They internalize the idea that dads are provisional parents whose involvement depends on mum's approval. These lessons shape their understanding of family roles and parental authority. This gatekeeping also affects your development as a parent. When your involvement is constantly subject to oversight and approval, you never fully develop confidence in your own judgment. You remain perpetually seeking validation rather than trusting your own instincts. You parent defensively, always aware that your access could be revoked if you fail to meet her standards. For the abuser, permission based gatekeeping offers sophisticated control. It allows her to appear supportive while maintaining ultimate authority. It creates a framework where your parenting can be withdrawn as punishment for other conflicts. It establishes legal and social precedences of her being the primary decision maker. And it does all of this while seeming collaborative and inclusive. The fourth type is gendered invalidation. This weaponizes your gender as justification for dismissing your parenting voice. Your contributions are not rejected because they are wrong, they're rejected because you are male. The logic becomes circular. You don't understand because you are not the mother. And because you are not the mother, your understanding does not matter. This invalidation takes many forms. Sometimes it's stated directly: you're a man, you wouldn't get it. Sometimes it's wrapped up in apparent sympathy: it's sweet that you're trying, but you wouldn't understand. Sometimes it's framed as biological fact: mothers just know these things naturally. But the result is always the same. Your perspective is disqualified based on your gender rather than evaluated on its merits. The abuser uses gendered invalidation because it taps into deep cultural narratives about parenting and gender. Society already positions mothers as more naturally attuned to children's needs. She simply amplifies this positioning until it becomes absolute disqualification of parental insight. The strategy is particularly effective because it aligns with existing biases in institutions, in social circles, and even within other fathers themselves. What makes this type especially damaging is how it attacks identity instead of behavior. When your parenting is criticized for specific actions, you can potentially modify those actions. But when your parenting is invalidated because of who you are, there's no path to improvement. You're always underqualified, always suspect, always operating from a deficit that can never be overcome through effort or competence. The progression of gendered invalidation is particularly insidious because it mirrors broader social messages. You might initially resist the idea that your gender makes you less capable as a dad. But when this message comes consistently from your abuser, and when it's reinforced by subtle biases within schools, in healthcare settings, and social services, it becomes harder to maintain confidence in your parental instincts. The impact on children witnessing gendered invalidation is significant. They learn that dad's perspectives matter less than mother's simply because of gender. They internalize beliefs about male emotional capacity, parental authority, and gendered roles that limit their understanding of what fathers can offer. These lessons often persist into their adult relationships and their own parenting approaches. This invalidation also connects to broader systems that fathers encounter. When your partner consistently frames your parental voice as less valid due to gender, it creates precedences They become useful to them in custody disputes, school conflicts, and even healthcare decisions. Professionals who might otherwise treat parents equally begin to see patterns of maternal authority and parental irrelevance that feel natural rather than manufactured. For the abuser, gender invalidation provides powerful leverage. It allows her to dismiss your inputs without engaging with its content. It aligns her position with cultural biases that exist beyond your relationship. It creates documentation of your apparent disengagement that appears to result from your own limitations rather than being systemically excluded from your parenting. And it does this while appearing to state biological and social facts rather than express personal preferences. The fifth type is narrative ownership. This goes beyond controlling parenting decisions to controlling the story of who the parents are. The abuser positions herself as the narrator of the family dynamics, defining roles, establishing reputations, and shaping how others understand your competence and involvement as a father. This type of framing operates through strategic storytelling. She becomes the spokesperson for the family's parenting dynamic. When speaking to professionals, she might say, "He's learning, bless him, he tries hard." When correcting you in front of others, she reframes what happened. "No, that's not what happened. What really happened was." When making decisions, she speaks for both of you. "We have decided," even when no such discussion took place. The abuser also ensures she's always the voice that engages with the outside world about your children. When talking to teachers, doctors, or family members about anything child related, she takes the lead and effectively silences you. She might speak over you mid sentence, correct you on irrelevant details, then continue the conversation herself, or directly signal that you should stop talking so she can handle it. This creates a dangerous precedent where professionals and family members learn to turn to her as the authoritative parent, while your voice becomes background noise. The abuser uses narrative ownership because it allows her to control not just present dynamics, but future perceptions. She's not just managing current conflicts, she's establishing the official version of your family's story. This becomes crucial groundwork for potential separation scenarios, custody arrangements, and social support systems. The story she tells becomes the stories others believe, and eventually it risks becoming the story you believe yourself. What makes narrative ownership particularly sophisticated is how it operates through seemingly positive interactions. When she tells others, "He's getting better at helping with the kids," it sounds kind of supportive. When she explains your parenting decisions to professionals, it appears collaborative. When she praises your involvement in front of friends, it seems appreciative. But each of these interactions reinforces her position as the authority who evaluates, who interprets, and who explains your role. The progression of narrative ownership is gradual but comprehensive. Initially, you might not notice that she's become the family spokesperson. But as the pattern develops, you realize that your own voice has been systematically replaced by her interpretation of your voice. Others know about your parenting through her lens. Your children understand your role through her explanations. Even you begin to see yourself through her narrative framework. Professionals who interact with your family learn to address her first, defer to her knowledge, and treat your input as supplementary rather than equal. The impact on children experiencing narrative ownership is particularly troubling. They learn that dad's story gets told by mum. They witness their father being defined by someone else rather than defining himself. They internalize patterns where one parent's voice becomes authoritative about both parents' competence and contribution. This narrative control also affects your relationship with your extended family, your friends, and professionals who work with your family. They develop understanding of your parenting based on her framing rather than direct observation or contribution from you. This creates social dynamics where others unconsciously reinforce the hierarchy she established, treating her as a reliable source of information about the family dynamics and the family functioning. For the abuser, narrative ownership provides long term strategic advantage. It allows her to shape perceptions before conflicts arise. It creates social and professional networks that view her as a competent parent and you as the developing one. It establishes patterns of communication where others naturally turn to her for information about family decisions and dynamics. And it does all of this while appearing to include and support your parenting role. Maternal superiority framing hits male victims with particular force because it weaponizes cultural narratives that many men have already internalized. Society tells fathers that we are naturally less equipped for parenting, that our involvement is optional rather than essential, that our instincts need to be validated by maternal approval before they are trustworthy. When an abusive partner amplifies these messages, she's not just attacking your competence, she's confirming fears you may have carried since becoming a father. The cultural backdrop makes this tactic almost invisible as abuse. Society celebrates fathers for basic involvement while expecting comprehensive competence from others. When an abusive partner leverages these double standards, her behavior appears to align with natural order rather than manufactured control. She seems like she's protecting the children from inadequacy rather than creating that inadequacy through systemic undermining. Men experiencing this tactic often struggle with shame that compounds the isolation. You know you love your children deeply. You know you're capable of caring for them well. But when your partner consistently frames your involvement as inadequate, when society provides little support for challenging this narrative, you begin to question your own perceptions. The shame isn't just about being controlled, it's about wondering if maybe she's right. The stoicism that society expects from men becomes another tool of entrapment. When you're dismissed as a parent, you're expected to absorb that dismissal without complaint. Fighting back risks being labeled as aggressive or controlling. Emotional responses to being sidelined from your children gets pathologized as instability rather than recognized as a natural reaction to systemic exclusion from your parenting rights. Male victims also face unique challenges in recognizing this tactic as abusive. We are conditioned to view ourselves as potentially dangerous to our families, as naturally less attuned to children's needs, as fortunate to be involved rather than entitled to partnership. When abuse comes wrapped in these familiar narratives, it can take years to understand that systemic dismissal of your parenting voice isn't natural hierarchy, it's deliberate control. The isolation that results from maternal superiority framing is particularly devastating for men. Our social networks often lack frameworks for discussing parenting struggles beyond surface level complaints. We're expected to be grateful for any involvement rather than expect equal partnership. When the one parent who should support our parental development systematically undermines it instead, we often have nowhere to turn for reality checking or support. Society also provides fewer resources for fathers questioning their parental competence. Parenting groups, support services, even professional interventions often default to viewing mothers as the primary parent and fathers as secondary supports. When you're already being told at home that your voice doesn't matter, finding your experience validated in broader systems becomes nearly impossible. The long term impact on male victims includes profound damage to parental identity and confidence. When your fundamental competence as a father is repeatedly questioned and dismissed, you may withdraw from parenting activities to avoid further humiliation. This withdrawal then becomes evidence of your disengagement, creating cycles of blame that are difficult to break even after recognizing the abuse. Recognizing maternal superiority framing requires developing awareness of patterns rather than focusing on individual incidences. Start paying attention to how parenting decisions get made in your household. Notice whether your input is genuinely considered or routinely dismissed. Observe whether your time with your children requires permission or happens naturally. And track whether your competence is acknowledged or constantly questioned. Document specific instances when your parenting voice is dismissed or overruled. Write down the exact words used, the circumstance, and your children's responses. This documentation helps you maintain clarity about patterns that might otherwise blur together over time. It also provides concrete examples when you need to explain the dynamic to others. Challenge gendered assumptions directly but strategically. When told you wouldn't understand because you're not the mother, respond with specifics. I understand because I've been present for every doctor's appointment this year. When your competence is questioned, provide evidence. I've successfully managed their bedtime routine for months when you're not here. Ground your responses in observable facts rather than emotional appeals. Maintain independent relationships with your children that don't require mediation. Create routines, activities, and connection points that exist outside the abuser's oversight. This becomes crucial for both your ongoing relationship with your children and for demonstrating your competence to outside observers who might later need to understand your parental involvement. Seek external validation of your parenting instincts through trusted friends, family members, or professionals who can observe your interactions with your children. When you're constantly told that your parenting is adequate, having outside perspectives becomes essential for maintaining confidence in your own competence and judgment. Build knowledge and skills that strengthen your confidence as a parent. Research child development, learn about age appropriate activities, understand educational approaches that interest you. The goal isn't to prove your worth to the abuser, it's to maintain your own sense of competence despite their systemic undermining. Connect with other fathers who understand the challenge of active parenting. Male focused parenting groups, online communities, or informal networks can provide reality checking when you're questioning your own perceptions. Other fathers who prioritize their parental relationships can validate experiences that your partner dismisses as irrelevant or overblown. If possible, involve neutral third parties in parenting discussions where your voice consistently gets dismissed. Teachers, counselors, pediatricians, or family friends can witness dynamics that might otherwise remain invisible. Their presence sometimes changes the dynamic, and their observations can validate your perceptions of systemic dismissal. Remember that protecting yourself from this tactic serves your children's interests as well as your own. Children benefit from having two actively engaged parents whose voices are equally valued. Resisting maternal superiority framing models healthy relationship dynamics and prevents your children from learning that fathers' perspectives naturally matter less than mothers. If you are currently experiencing maternal superiority framing, remember that your instincts as a father matter. Your voice in your children's lives has value. Your competence doesn't require anybody else's validation. You're not asking for permission to parent your own children. You're claiming your natural right to be fully present in their lives. The path to recovery involves consistent choice to trust yourself over systemic dismissal from your abuser, to value your perspective despite cultural messages that minimize it, and to maintain connection with your children regardless of gatekeeping that tries to limit it. Your children need you to be fully present as their father, not conditionally involved as someone else's assistant. You are not alone in this experience. Other fathers have walked this path and found their way to authentic, confident parenting relationships. Your voice matters. Your presence makes a difference. Your role as a father is not conditional, negotiable, or subject to anyone else's approval. This is Stand Again, lived experience platform for male survivors of family violence. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Your voice might just help another man find his. If you're looking for one on one support, you can book coaching with a member of the Stand Again team. Simply visit standagain.com.au, where you will also find grounded information on surviving and recovering from family violence as a man. As always, remember that no matter how many times you've been knocked down, you can stand again.